Luke, welcome to the Gymnastics Growth Show.
Thanks very much for having me.
You're most welcome. Thanks for being here. How are you?
Fantastic. Really good. Busy, crazy busy as ever. But yeah, really enjoying life.
Good. That's important. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Like you said that you're busy, and I'm not surprised because you've got a lot of things that you're involved with. Very, inspirational things. So let's just talk about what some of those projects are. I think the audience would find that interesting. Ex-cricketer, so an ex-high-level athlete. I think that's important context for people as well. And then you've got, so Activate Management is an organisation that you've co-founded.
Yes, I'll pull it back actually a little bit. So Activate Camps, which is holiday camps for kids, was founded by myself and my original business partner and friend back in 2004. Yeah. And that sort of started the Activate brand.
Got it.
And we now have various sort of aspects of it, from Activate Talent Management, which is managing high profile sports people and media people, to Activate Holiday Camps, to Activate Wear, which is sportswear, Activate Marketing, lots of different avenues. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, and did that start through cricket? So like your first ever camps, were they cricket camps for kids basically, or did it start off differently?
Well, I'd love to say it was all my idea and all, brilliant strategy. It would be a complete lie. I was actually going through a very difficult time in my life, and Toby, my business partner, came to me, and he had just come back from America, coaching football over there, which is, those camps are huge, and said, listen, let's set up some sports camps at private schools. Let's do one. And you do the cricket, I'll do the football, and do you know, I was just like, yeah, whatever, let's give it a go. Yeah, I wasn't, I wasn't particularly in a great place, and I just thought, yeah, why not? And I remember that first year, so I think 2005, we had one holiday camp in a Grace Dew school in Leicestershire, private school. One camp, 1 week, we must have had 100 kids, and it was chaos. We didn't have any idea what we were doing, but that's often how business starts, isn't it? Just from that kind of idea, and suddenly you're there, and that's how the whole thing grew from there. And it grew really fast. Yeah, and then here you are now with I guess thousands of kids going through those camps at different times. Yeah. But I don't know the exact number, but it would be in the tens of thousands. Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, and isn't that interesting though? How sometimes it does just start with chaos, like I'm guilty of wanting things to be perfect all the time, but perfection is often a big barrier, I guess, to progress, isn't it? Because then you just don't actually take any action. Yeah, I think perfection can be a gift and a curse. Yeah. Your quality standards are going to be. Look at this, setup here is a great example. But you've got to do. You've got to take action, and sometimes you've got to take action and then learn by your actions. And I think that's. Anyone who works with me, one of the biggest things that I tell people is, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Yeah. It's okay. We'll learn from it quickly. It's not like we're celebrating mistakes, but they are part of the really important journey. But to make a mistake, you have to do. Yeah. So you can sit there trying to get perfection, and you just never ever do, and then you never ever learn, and then you don't make progress. Yeah. I can certainly resonate with that message. Definitely, it's been a barrier for me because I've got such high standards or expectations of myself. But it's like you can still have those, but they just come a bit further down the line when you meet them. There's a bit of a pathway, isn't there, to try and get there in the first place? So, really interesting. Obviously, you are involved heavily with Nile Wilson Gymnastics, and again, just for full sort of transparency for the listeners, that you are one of my clients as well, which I'm very grateful for, and really enjoy the work I do with your team. That has been amazing to see the growth of that, which you're heavily involved with. So, like, you're clearly like an entrepreneur and a business owner. Do you consider yourself an entrepreneur? Yes. Yeah, I do. Yeah, very much in essence. I don't know what the definition is necessarily. But I just, I'm a risk taker. I want to move forward. I want to grow and build and take great ideas and move them forward. And I think that's entrepreneurship. Yeah. And that exists very much within Nile Wilson Gymnastics. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And what's the vision with it all? So you're doing amazing things with, like, you've mentioned the holiday camps, but also the gymnastics, Nile Wilson Gymnastics. This is kids focused on sport. Why is that so important to you? Is that because of your history, do you think, as an athlete yourself? That's a great question. There has to, and I find it right up there in the priority list. There has to be synergy between what I'm doing. So I can't just go off and, own a pub. It doesn't make any difference it doesn't have any synergy to what I'm doing. But the synergy is around kids, sport, being active, encouraging an active lifestyle. I think it's just been such an important part of my life that it's a space I guess I have a real passion for, that kind of, and I know I was in an elite sport background, but I don't see it like that. I guess my passion is in what we'd call recreational and just getting kids active. And I think, now as a father, I've seen how the impact that sport has had on my kids, and and I'm sort of preaching to the converted here, but it's huge, and I think that's therefore where my drive and focus around business is very much.
Yeah. I was in Canada last week, as I mentioned, and have you played pickleball before?
I haven't. No, but I've watched it. I've played paddle, but I've watched pickleball. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they seem to have like their own little community, the pickleball community, and we. So David, who's one of the coaches that and friend that I was working alongside, he invited me and said, look, he's never played, but he's played badminton before at the centre. Do you want to come along and play pickleball? And I've played a little bit before, and jumped at the chance. Had no idea what to expect, but we were kind of met with essentially probably 20 senior citizens, let's say, and I tell you what, we had so much fun on that day, and we went back again for another couple of hours. And the reason I'm saying this is because, like, again, the power of sport, just uniting that community, was unbelievable to be part of. You got senior citizens that probably, a lot of them spoke about some of the challenges that they were having as well. And I just think where else do you really pull people together like that?
Yeah.
And obviously not a single phone in sight. Everyone was just playing sport for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I imagine the highlight of their day, like it was for me. And it just reminded me again of, like, it's so important what we do.
Yeah.
And I came from recreational gymnastics because, I don't know if you know this, I only did 1 to 2 hours a week of gym. That was it. And I've always felt how important it is to make sure that part of the sport stays alive, because it could be that someone has an entire career in sport, but they've only done an hour of gymnastics a week. And I'm sure many of the young children that come through Nile Wilson Gymnastics, that will be the case for them.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think so. I always think with sport, it's one of the very few things left that makes everything stop. So and I'm as guilty as anyone, you're glued to your device and, phones and laptops and iPads, the TV, etc. But sport's that one thing that makes it kind of stop, and you're really engaged in it.
Yeah.
And especially in a sport like gymnastics, which requires real focus. It's like why I love skiing so much, is because in that moment, I'm really present. I'm not distracted by anything.
Yeah.
And I think sport will hold that quality till the end of time. And it's becoming a rare breed.
Yeah, you're right. I wonder if because I've not thought of it like that, but you're absolutely right. I wonder if it's just because we fill time. I mean, obviously there's the other side of devices, which is like we've got to work on them and everything's that way focused. But in our downtime, empty time, and that might just be waiting for a train or whatever that might be, we fill time, don't we, with using our devices. But essentially, I can't think of a better way of spending a few hours. If I'm not going to be doing something else, I'd like to be playing sport, or I go fishing, or pickle, or whatever that might be. But it's just important because, particularly me now being so heavily involved with the Olympic side of the sport and the competitive, it's like, let's not lose track and sight of where this all comes from.
100%. Yeah.
And when you just go in every day and you're working with a set of Olympians or national team athletes, you can quite easily just lose track of what this is all about in the big picture, the big perspective, I think. Yeah,
well, but the guys at an Olympic Games inspire millions, and they inspire that recreation. It's just, so that the power of that is enormous. It's just the understanding that's not what all sport is about. And I think particularly with Nile Wilson Gymnastics, that's something that we really, really focus on. In our whole organisation, if we end up producing an Olympian, great, but it won't be from an absolute drilling down on focus to produce Olympian. We're focused on getting as many kids doing gymnastics as absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And if as a byproduct we produce Olympian, great.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, this whole sentiment.
And what's great about that, and I talk about this a lot with my clients, is to be so clear on your vision so that drives decision making. And I just find a lot of organizations, they just don't quite have that clarity. So you've got absolute conviction in the fact that you're doing this to, I mean, and I've understood this before, correct me if I'm wrong, but you want to take kids off these waiting lists that are just sat on waiting lists doing nothing because clubs can't accommodate them, and get them into gymnastics. You know, that is an important mission of yours, I believe.
Yeah.
And because you've got clarity and conviction on that, it really does help decision making. You know, when you've got to think about, okay, maybe another commercial opportunity that you might have, or whether it's what equipment you're going to buy for the gyms. You know, it's driven by, well, what's the end goal and what is our mission here? Because the mission kind of comes first, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah, it gives you something to go back to. You know, anyone who's kind of written down a set of values or a set of principles for their life or their organization, there's something you can go back to, right? And you can just go, where have I been with my actions recently? I'll look at those values. Do they align? Yeah, I'm good. I think in this case with Nile Wilson Gymnastics, we know that that's who we are. So we can always go back to it and go, well, does it align with that? Now, there's obviously, you need flexibility, and there's a blurriness around certain parts of it where you have to be flexible or you have to evolve. But you know, hand on heart, that true essence of what we're about, that won't change.
Yeah. And emotion always gets in the way, doesn't it? But then the logical part is the clarified mission, I think, and the values and things like that. How is that kind of woven into what you guys do at Nile Wilson Gymnastics, do you think? Like how would a member or a member of staff, because obviously you're employing dozens of staff across multiple sites, so how would they feel those values being embedded within the culture and what you're doing?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think that it starts with the program and the how you set up the classes, and when you're, you know, where you're trying to fill space, you know, and if you're, you know, very heavily focused on getting in as many squad kids as possible, then of course your program is going to be lopsided that way. Yeah. Whereas if your program is in a balance in a way that we have it, then that's already showing where you're at, and I think that's really important. I think it's also important that when coaches come on board with you, you quickly explain to them who you are. I think that's really important. So that coach isn't just working for a gymnastics club or a gymnastics coaching business. They know what the whole mantra or mission of the business is. So then they also have to make a decision whether they want to be part of that or not. And I would 100% respect someone who said, this isn't for me, I don't want to coach here. No problem. I get that. That's okay. But I think we just have to be we are very clear about it from the outset and all the time. And then coaches make an informed decision whether they want to be part of that or not.
And that's almost the ideal situation for you, isn't it? You give them an opportunity and they say, well, actually, it's not for me. That's better for you than finding that out maybe 6 months down the road, I guess. And
to some, I mean, coaches are often young people, aren't they? And they change and evolve. And it might be that they feel that way, and then 2 years down the line, they want to change and do something else. And I also respect that. That's not a problem. If suddenly a coach feels like, well, actually, I would like to be part of a national setup, that's okay. They you know, I wouldn't ever hold that against anybody, but it doesn't change who we are.
Yeah, again, clarity and conviction. I love that. It's good. And again, message for the leaders that are listening, the gymnastics leaders, the head coaches, the club owners, the directors, is like, you've just got to get clarity on that stuff, because without it, everything else downstream just becomes problematic, I find. So
definitely. I mean, you know, we obviously have our clubs, and we're growing, and we interact with different clubs as we grow. And the most common thing, I think, with clubs who are struggling is that they are trying to be everything to everyone, and it's impossible. You're trying to fulfill the wishes of the parents, the gymnasts, the coaches, you know, your own aspirations in your own head. It's very difficult to be everything to everyone. And you're better off just saying, this is who we are, and allowing people to have an informed decision whether they want to be part of that or not. And I would recommend that to everyone out there.
And doing that unapologetically. You know, like, you know, don't need to be vanilla. You don't need to just try and fit in with everybody else. You know, you don't have to be outrageous either, but be bold, be yourself. and you'll attract the right people, and you might repel the others, but that's fine because you're not for everybody anyway.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's being brave enough to make that decision, isn't it? Yeah. You are employing a lot of people, and obviously you've got leadership structures in place because, again, for the context of the audience that are listening, Nile Wilson Gymnastics isn't running over just one site. There's several sites, and it's growing. So with a leadership structure and a management structure and then the staff underneath, what's important to you, or how do you make sure that you, alongside your other directors, are able to manage that workforce effectively? And there might be someone listening that could do with some leadership advice.
Yeah. It's the biggest challenge with growth. It's how you, as a leadership group, allow the organisation. Allow might be the wrong word. You facilitate the organisation to grow with it, and leadership structures have to grow within it. The biggest thing I would say is you have to find a way to empower people downwards. So because otherwise, if you have a structure, for instance, where the youngest coach and most inexperienced coach has a problem, and they direct that right to the top of the company, and that keeps happening. As you grow, that's impossible because that person at the top of the company hasn't got time to be able to manage every little thing that happens. So you have to have structures that are coping with problems throughout the organization, or challenges throughout the organization, so that if it gets to the top of the organization, it's a very serious problem. But to do that, you have to empower people. You have to allow people to grow, to make mistakes, to become leaders within themselves. And often we're talking about quite young people. Yeah. And that's a huge part of what we're trying to do. And we are evolving it all the time. We're learning, did we get that right? But that's what we're trying to do, is create leaders within leaders, so that as we grow, there's a culture and a leadership structure which is managing itself rather than it all being about one person. Yeah. And I think a lot of gymnastics clubs find challenges in that, where it is dominated by one person, because either that person's on great form or they're not on great form. They try and grow, it becomes really difficult. But I think that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah. And it's scary, right? Because it feels like you're just releasing control over the organisation. But now you're at this stage, and I know that it's work in progress and it always will be. Do you feel like it is scary? Do you think it's more empowering for you guys as leaders to know that actually it's its kind of own organism which is evolving without you needing to push the buttons?
I don't find it scary anymore. I did at the start, and outside of Nile Wilson Gymnastics, I've had the same experiences. I find it really empowering. And I think you go through, I don't know many kind of business leaders who are kind of laid back. We tend to be, quite control freaks, and that, intensity. There's a fire in there that, and kind of without that, I'm not sure you would get there. But then suddenly that first let of control is scary. But then as you do it more and more, you can see how it works. And then it becomes a relief. It becomes a relief to go, actually, this is all right. And that relief of knowing, and it's a bit corny, but it's so true. It's like failure is not an end point. A mistake is not an end point. It's not, so if you let go and someone makes a mistake, we always say, well, the business isn't going to fall over and crumble. We just learn from it really quickly. And it starts to become then just a really healthy, empowering type of thing to keep encouraging.
So here at NR Gymnastics, we're once again super proud to be partnered with Little Stars Leotards, who've been a fantastic partner for us over the years. Not only do they provide exceptional service for their customers, but they're a great team for us to work with, and they provide us a lot of value too. It's no surprise that so many clubs here in the UK, but also overseas, are making the switch to Little Stars Leotards for their service, but also the quality of leotards and clothing that they provide to the community. So if you're interested in checking out why they're such a great team to work with, visit littlestarsleotards.co.uk. And thanks again, Little Stars, for being such a fantastic brand partner. So you mentioned that the team dynamic is probably one of the biggest challenges. What would some of the others be, do you think, in terms of an organisation of your size, which is trying to scale?
Yeah, I think that, the average demographic of a coach is someone young, and nowadays times have changed for how young people want to work and what their aspirations are within certain industries. You know, I'm nearly 50, and I remember coming out of university, and it was like, right, you go off and do this, and you work at it, and then that becomes your job, and that doesn't exist in the same way. People are much more transient and much more, well, I'll try this, I won't try that. And so we're dealing in employing a demographic who are quite transient. So it's really important that we do everything we can to help coaches see it as a career choice, to see it as a career progression for work and for them personally. And that's a huge challenge, doing that all the time. And as you scale, you're dealing with more and more people. And it's, I'm trying to, Nile Wilson Gymnastics as a group now probably employs between 150 and 200 people, and that's growing all the time. So we need to be able to pay enough attention to those 200 people that they feel that this is a place they want to stay. And that's a real challenge.
But what's good is within the organisation, you do have examples of coaches that have started, let's say, towards the lower part of the org chart, and they're rapidly moving up, and there's definitely room for them to move and to continue to do so, which is exciting. I think. I mean, there's not many gymnastics organisations where that type of growth could actually be possible, I don't think. So yeah, it's really, really cool to see and exciting to be part of. But in the industry, and every coach and gymnastics leader will be able to resonate with this, it's just becoming increasingly difficult to source coaches. And I don't know what the solution is, because I think there's a lot of barriers and a lot of friction. Part of that being, how quickly can you get someone upskilled, qualified, how expensive it might be, how time consuming. I guess there's the NGB that holds some of that process up as well. But it is difficult right now, isn't it? And is this reflected in other sports as well that you might be connected with, or is it particularly difficult, do you think, in gymnastics?
I think it's particularly difficult in gymnastics, but I do think just generally sports coaches call that it's a tough space to get people to really commit. Also, if you've got to get certain qualifications, which of course you do, that takes time. Even if we pay the cost, it takes time, it takes commitment. Someone then thinks, is that for me? I don't know. And again, think that transient nature of that demographic. I mean, I don't know a leadership meeting that we have had in the last 2 years where recruitment hasn't been in the top 1, 2, or 3. It's massive of where do we find coaches? How do we upskill them? And I think it's a real challenge for the gymnastics industry. We spend a lot of time trying to solve a few of those problems. How do we keep coaches, keep upskilling them? How do we help work with British Gymnastics to run more courses to upskill people? How do we attract people from outside of the gymnastics industry into it? Because I think that's a huge step that we've got to work better on. At the moment, gymnastics coaches tend to come from gymnasts, obviously, and I understand that the natural pathway, but really for us to move the dial on that, we need to attract people from outside the sport to come in and want to learn it to then become a coach. It's
and it's an international thing, and obviously I'm very connected to the international gymnastics community, and I get messages every week which are like, Nick, we're looking for a full-time coach, and I'm like, sounds like a great job, but join the list. There's I could put you on a list with 200 other clubs that have contacted me that are still seeking the same type of person that you are. And so it's not just at participation end, it's competitive end. It's perhaps even harder at the moment to find a credible, experienced coach who's got experience within competitive gymnastics, that's willing and able to relocate and tick all of those boxes. It is difficult. I'm just wondering, how do we break down even more of those barriers? What do we need to do? It's as a coach developer, it's something that I'm always thinking about. What can we do to kind of ease that and ultimately help clubs to provide better service, provide more coaching, and get more people into the sport.
I think there's a responsibility for everyone within the industry to keep promoting how great a sport gymnastics is on lots of levels. I mean, I think about the amount of parents that turn up and watch, and are any of those parents looking for work? Have they ever thought about being a gymnastics coach, or it's just not for them because they've never done the sport? I think every sport almost has to break down its own barriers of, is there a kind of hidden, well, you have to come from the sport to be able to progress. Like many years ago, sort of the Premier League football manager had to play at the highest level, and then that got kind of smashed, didn't it? And now they don't even talk about it anymore. Yeah. Maybe within the gymnastics industry, we need to do, well, it's not a maybe, we do need to do much more to keep amplifying what an amazing sport it is for kids and for adults, what an amazing community it is, and then encourage people to join, to come in from outside the tent, to come in. And then we've got a chance. If we keep it a tight community, and sometimes the keeping of a tight community can be done on purpose and sometimes just subliminally, then the net of who's going to be part of it is always going to be restricted.
Yeah, much smaller. Do you mind if we talk about your agency for a moment?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm fascinated with that world. Obviously, you mentioned it's talent in media, entertainment, and obviously sport as well. So athletes like Nile Wilson that you've supported and have been with. What are the common threads that you see through working with talent at that level across I guess any of the industries? Because you're working with just amazing people, right?
Incredible people.
And that must be amazing for you and your team to be able to work with amazing people, because then it's kind of like this whole self-fulfilling cycle of just awesomeness, right? You're having great conversations, you're connected with great people, they're doing amazing things. It's like it's that trickle up and down effect.
Yeah.
But what's the common thread there with particularly the athletes that you're working with across different sports? What have they got that maybe your average athlete just doesn't quite have, perhaps? Or what are some of the qualities that really stand out, at least?
Yeah. They're obsessed. They're obsessed by their craft. So I was fortunate to manage Jimmy Anderson, the England cricketer, for the best part of a decade. And he's the best example where people watch him, perform for England, and he looked like such a natural talent. And he just wasn't. I was with him all the time. He absolutely was obsessed with his craft and how could he get better? How could he get better? It was all about that. I mean, the thing with that level of athlete, they're not easy people to live with. They are extraordinary, and therefore they live. You can't expect them to fit into your world. You have to fit into their world because they're trying to do something extraordinary.
Interesting.
So you can't expect them to do ordinary things as we might expect in ordinary life. They're not living that life.
Yeah.
So I've often used to get kind of interns or someone coming to work for me, and I said, they'd say something like, well, I wrote them a really long email and they've not replied. And I'm like, okay, you don't know who you're dealing with here. That person is not interested in a long email. They're interested in being amazing in the gym or on the football pitch or as a broadcaster. They're obsessed with that craft, that talent. And I think that obsession around being incredible at that skill translates for me in business. It's exactly the same. You don't think about the money or the numbers. You're just thinking about getting better.
Yeah.
And the most high level people I've met, they all have that in common. So they know that there's going to be great rewards of fame or money around it, for sure. If you win an Olympic gold medal, you know what's going to come. But that's not what's driving them in the gym. It's the mastering the skill. It's then go, can I do it again? Or can I make that a little bit harder? Or or they'll see someone else do something and they're like, how do I do that? And it's that obsession. It's like a fire that is not going out. And, I'm conscious I might sound full of cliches here, but it's just, I'm sort of saying it as it is. It's the ability to outlast anyone else in that space. So, because it's hard, it's really hard. Whether someone's trying to win an Olympic gold or play for England at any sport, it's really hard. There's a lot of downs, and their obsession means they outlast other people who give up. And I think that's an amazing lesson for us all in life. In business, I think about that a lot. Just outlast people. Be obsessed and outlast people. Yeah.
And that's a massive competitive edge if you can do that. I mean, how much of that's teachable, do you think, or how much of that is just part of their character? I mean, it's obviously learned behavior, learned mindset and beliefs probably from when they were younger. But I mean, we're not creating that at 20 years old, are we?
No,
the fire is well and truly lit before then.
Yeah, I think some people just have it raging from the age of 4 years old, and other people it will take a little bit of time, and everybody's slightly different, and people are triggered by different things or inspired by different things. So you still get your introvert and your extrovert, and you'll get your extrovert who'll be obsessed, but will also be inspired by the crowd and the attention, for instance, where the introvert won't. So it will show in different times and different stages, but. I think gymnasts particularly are the most extraordinary people because let's just quantify it. If you have an Olympic final, you have one go, one routine. You're in the Olympic final. Okay, you've qualified to get there, but you're in the Olympic final. You have one go to do something which is incredibly difficult to the highest standard with millions of people watching you. And if you get it wrong, you might get another shot in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
Right? So to be in that intensity and to hold your own, you have to have something which cannot be taught. It's something which is just within their soul, which is like a fire, an obsession to say, this is exactly where I need to be right now. And that's, I don't know how much you can teach that.
And I belong here.
I belong here.
Yeah, I belong here.
Yeah.
Which is... And I mean, Nile's journey is particularly interesting, I think, when you hear about his affirmations and his kind of how much, I guess, why's my mind gone blank on this one? Visualization that he'd done ahead of that, but he knew that he would be in that moment. And I think that's particularly fascinating. Just coming back to something that you'd said, though, because high performers are often described as being difficult people to work with, and when you've kind of alluded to that in terms of like that,
very difficult.
Yeah, there's some challenges.
I'll stick another very on that. Very, very difficult.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
And there's some challenges there, and it was interesting. You said you've got to step into their world, or like don't expect them to come towards you. And I've found that as well. I mean, selfish is a word that we often hear. These high performance athletes, they are selfish. They just care about themselves and like what's going to work for their next training session, and who's going to be here, and like it's just, and that's how they operate because they have to. Like no one else is going to think about that stuff sometimes. So that is particularly interesting, and I'm just thinking about whether a portion of the audience are thinking about someone that they might work with who is particularly difficult to work with, but maybe whilst that doesn't excuse certain behaviors, it might be par for the course when you're working with someone that is driven, hungry, and potentially very gifted as well, which is, I guess, an important part of that recipe.
Yeah. I mean, the gifting part of it, I think that's just an added bonus. I mean, I think the obsession and the training and the graft, overtakes it all. But they are extremely difficult people to live with because they are selfish. They are completely self-absorbed. And the number of partners that I've had call me over the years going, oh, he or she won't listen to me, or we just want to go out for my birthday, and they didn't want to do it, and they got to the restaurant, they didn't like the food, so they didn't eat anything and sulked. And it's all of that because they're thinking about the next training session or the next match, and everything else is a very, very distant second place, very distant. They also don't, if you've been in elite sport from a young age, you don't have much real world understanding. I often had clients who'd ring me at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning and ask me to speak to the bank for them that day. And I would say, it's not possible. And they'd genuinely say, why?
Yeah.
And I'd say, because banks are not open today. They'd go, at least of all that it's 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning and I've got stuff to do. But they would just not have any concept of how that works, because I sometimes think of it as, if we're super focused on something we're doing, like say you're at home and you're really focused on something, someone's sort of nagging at you, a partner or a kid, one of your kids, or is just like and you're really focused on it, and that sort of irritation you have because you need to focus your energy on whatever it is you're doing. Filling out an application form or whatever it might be. It's like that on steroids. So their whole obsession is around their craft, and basically, unless you're talking about that, everything else is quite irritating. And in management, you have to understand that. So, if you're expecting to turn up for a meeting and them to be really concerned how your day is, that you're going to be sorely disappointed.
How do you deal with that? I mean, I'm assuming through empathy, because you've also been a high level athlete yourself, so maybe you've got an understanding of what that kind of feels like. But also, how else do you deal with that? Because it's a partnership at the end of the day. Like you are important as well.
Yeah,
and they might not see that.
Yeah, I think they do see it, but there's just a limited amount of empathy. Yeah. I honestly think the biggest times for me, you have to go to the events, go to an Olympic final, or go to I remember going to, I don't know, hundreds of England cricket matches to watch Jimmy Anderson in the highest of pressure. You know that the day before he's picked up an injury and he's got some difficult stuff going on somewhere in his life, and he's not 100%, and he's under extreme pressure, and then you see them perform to a level which blows your mind. I think in that moment you're like, that's why, because they normal people can't do that. You can't
comprehend what they're going through either.
Yeah,
so,
can't. The intensity of that moment is it's like white noise type intensity, and they can perform at the highest of levels. And in that moment you go, okay, I can't expect them to be everything. You can't be a genius and also be like the world's best friend. It just, they don't. Everyone's got their limitations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Where do you get your inspiration from? I mean, you're surrounded by inspiring people when you're working with them, but I mean, is there any other source that you find inspiration in the work that you do? And
I guess my inspirations have changed a lot over the years. When I played cricket, I obviously had my sporting inspirations, and then in the business world, I have some people who inspire me within business. And I think I listen to Alex Hormozy a lot. Nowadays, and I live and breathe a lot of the stuff that he says, and I find him very inspiring. Yeah, because I think particularly as an entrepreneur, it's tough. It's very, very difficult. And you have, with the age of online, you have lots of people telling you how it should be, and people giving their opinion, and this is how you should do it. And if you're doing that, you're doing wrong, and all of those sorts of things. Yeah. And I sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes it's just lecturing people. And actually, it can convince people that there's an easy way to be an entrepreneur. There isn't. Joanna and I talk about it all the time. You got to chew the glass. It's like
it's rough.
It's rough, and if you're not ready for rough, then you're in the wrong space. And I think my inspiration comes from like an Alex who says that. He's like, this is hard. Yeah. Whichever way you do this, this is going to be really, really hard. So there are better ways of doing it. But even in the better ways of doing it, it's extremely difficult. And I get my inspiration now in the business world from people like Alex, who I think, do you know what? I need that sometimes. So on a tough day, I'll tune into something he's saying, and it makes a big difference.
And there's almost got to be, or certainly I found, you've actually got to enjoy chewing the glass, because
100%.
Burying yourself in, it's going to happen. You're going to have to bury yourself into work. You're going to have to ride out all those rough moments. But you need to enjoy the process of chewing the glass, and not just be doing this for the outcome. Because I mean, certainly what I found is the outcome never feels particularly great, but then you just move on to the next thing anyway, because it's in our entrepreneurial spirit that you're always just trying to build. It's not about savoring the moment. Now there'll be people listening to this saying, I've got this totally wrong, and perhaps that is they're right. I don't know, but maybe you can relate to that. For me, it's about, okay, what's next? Yeah. Rightly or wrongly. And so it's a tough balance, I think, between striving for something and then also being content, where you kind of can't do both at the same time. It's really,
It's like it's what is your driver for content? Is it an outcome or is it the process? And actually, we sometimes con ourselves that it's the outcome, but I think it's the process.
I think it's the process, because otherwise I'd be bored if I have half a day. I mean, I don't have half a day to do nothing, but if I did, I would be bored, and I would fill it with a project. And it's like I just enjoy work. And
also, your outcomes change. So, like for instance, yourself. Look, we're in an unbelievable studio that you've built yourself. I don't know, 15 years ago, if I told you this was your outcome, you'd go, oh, that'd be great. But it's kind of happened, and now you've moved on. So it's not, your outcomes change, and our what we believe is possible changes all the time. Yeah. And so if you're defined by that, I think that's going to be really difficult. I think you're driven by the process. I always think of it as being that chewing the glass kind of analogy it's basically feeling uncomfortable. So I think as an entrepreneur, you feel uncomfortable a lot, where it's like, is this right? And I always think it's how long you can sit in that feeling, and because others will give up when they feel that feeling. They will, 100%. You just outlast people when they feel uncomfortable, extreme uncomfort. And then eventually you do it enough that, like you say, you start to actually enjoy it, because you know you're in a process of growing and learning. And you're like, okay, this is difficult. This is uncomfortable. This is a good thing, because I'm going to grow out of it.
And the parallel there to an athlete is exactly the same. It's like they feel uncomfortable. They have to outlast, as you mentioned before. They don't like the physical preparation. There's long hours. They wake up feeling sore. They probably want to eat other shit. They want to go to parties with their friends. There's all of that stuff that they have to sacrifice and not have. And that is the chewing of the glass for them as well. And if they're just doing it for the medal, that wouldn't be enough. But again, there's that kind of twisted feeling of like, I hate this, but I love it at the same time. Like, this is what I'm doing it for. I feel alive. And that feeling of like that primal feeling, I think, of pushing and challenging yourself and stepping out. And growth is painful, but pretty magical at the same time, I think. There's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, I live with the mindset of I am not going to give up. I am not going to give up. You could throw anything at me, I will not give up. And if you take that out of your equation, just of your life, of giving up, whatever it is, podcasting, coaching, entrepreneurship, high-level sport, being the best dad you can be, whatever it might be, if you take away giving up, you're in. You're going to go. You're going to get knocks, and you'll go, okay, I get up and go. And I think that people who are trying to achieve extraordinary things, they're not going to give up.
And perhaps that's why many of these athletes go on to do great things outside of gymnastics, for example, or outside their sport. I mean, look at the work that Nile's doing. Amazing stuff. I get a lot of inspiration from looking at athletes that I've supported when they were younger, and then see what they're doing now. And a lot of them becoming entrepreneurs or business owners, or just great. They bring up great families, and I personally find that to be quite inspiring also.
Definitely.
Looking up towards people that have accomplished more, and then looking towards people that have you've seen them grow and develop. People like Nile, like seeing what he's building now, which is amazing. I think of like Ellie Downey, for example, who I've known since she was a young girl, and seeing now her expansion into the world of being like a business owner and like following her dream. Like, I just find all of that very inspiring to see. And it's nice because, hopefully at some point you might have had an impact on their journey as well. And so it's just nice to kind of reciprocate that.
Well, you definitely will have, Nick, for sure.
Yeah, no, really, really good. Luke, I've loved this conversation. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, pleasure.
I think there'll be a lot that people can take away as coaches, business owners, entrepreneurs. And I really appreciate your insights, your mindset. I've found this inspiring and probably the conversation that I needed today. So thanks very, very much for coming back to Derby and spending some time with me.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Gymnastics Growth Show. Now, if you're an ambitious gymnastics coach with a hunger for self-improvement, check out my Gymnastics Growth Academy, where you'll find members from over 40 countries, all accessing my masterclasses, courses, templates, live community calls, exercise libraries, and so much more. It's a program that members have described as life-changing. So why don't you check it out for yourself? Head to gymnasticsgrowth.com to learn more. See you on the inside.